Don't you remember the beginning of 2020, before the pandemic? The housing market was looking pretty bright for a lot of people. Interest rates were pretty normal. We had a very even supply and demand. Matter of fact, it even leaned on the buyer's side a little bit in most areas. And people were getting fair prices for their homes, and buyers were getting fair prices for the homes. Fast forward 3 years later, and the dream of owning a home for many people is over, as the cost of purchasing a home has now reached levels that you would not even believe. In some cases, it's costing the average person 50% more than it did 3 years earlier. So let's take a little closer look at that and see what's going on here. I just did a live stream this Sunday, and I just pulled up some statistics for you to look at. As a matter of fact, this was in Business Insider, and they said that in 2020, the annual income around $75,000 was sufficient, but today you'll need almost $115,000. Imagine the surprise of some people when they took a hiatus during that time of buying a house, because there were so many of these housing crash bros that were telling you that the housing market was going to crash, and that with the start of the pandemic, you're going to see a wave of foreclosures that hit the market. Well, here we are 3 years later, no housing crash, no wave of foreclosures that hit the market, and we're still in a huge predicament of housing prices still continuing to go up. Matter of fact, according to Fortune.com, according to Case-Shiller and Goldman Sachs, they are estimating for next year it's going to go up even more. Not as much as it did this year. They were saying around 3.75 was the increase for this year, 2023, but they're expecting it to go up another 1.6% nationally across the United States. Just for you to know, though, not all areas are going to see this type of increase. Always check with your local real estate agent. But for the overall United States market, they're still saying that we're going to see an increase, no matter where the interest rates go, whether they go up or down. For the last several years, I've been saying that this has been the weirdest housing market that I've ever dealt with. And then as we go into the next year, it's going to be equally as weird. Mostly because of the fact that if interest rates increase, that means that home prices decrease. That's how it's always been. You're going to see higher interest rates. That's going to mean sellers are going to have to take a hit. The problem with that is, and what a lot of these housing crash bros didn't put into perspective, is that a lot of areas do not have enough supply of homes on the market in order to meet the demand of how many people are wanting to purchase. We have a excess of built up demand of people that are trying to get into their very first and second homes. Those homes are not available, and home builders have not been building enough homes in that price point. So here we are again with home prices that continuously go up because of the lack of supply. Everybody's been hoping for a housing crash, and what caused a housing crash the last time was because of the fact that we had overbuilt. We had built way too many houses, and we saw more and more people heading into foreclosure, which caused home prices to go down. Not only that, we also saw the interest rates at that time continue to go up as well. Hence the reason why we have had so many decreases in prices in areas all across the United States, especially in hot areas like Orlando, Florida, Phoenix, Arizona, Las Vegas. Those areas had a lot of overbuilding, so they saw the biggest decreases. I even lived in Orlando at that time, and I got out just in the nick of time before home prices really started to crash. Today's market does not look like that. We have not overbuilt in the United States like we did in years past. So in order for us to offset it, and the government has been trying to tamper down inflation, they have continued to raise interest rates that eventually affected the bonds market, which eventually affected mortgage rates, in hopes that home prices would come down with higher mortgage rates. That's what the Fed was trying to do, but that isn't what happened because we just don't have enough supply of houses. Now we know what happened after the crash of 2008 all the way into 2009, 2010, and we're sitting here in 2023. Now we know why the dynamics of those two housing markets are completely different, and how we can't even really compare them. The only thing we can really look at is the interest rates. And the other thing that we have to factor in is if we keep looking at the jobs market, the foreclosure market, and interest rates, all of those things are going to be a recipe for the housing prices to come down. If the jobs market has a collapse, that means that more people are going to lose their jobs. If they lose their jobs, they're going to be forced to sell their house. This is not a great situation for people that own a home that are trying to keep it, but it's something to keep an eye on if you're trying to find a more affordable home. The next thing you need to focus on is interest rates. This is one of those times that this makes me extremely nervous, because if interest rates go down like some analysts are predicting next year, the closer we head to the presidential race, they're predicting that interest rates will come down some. And anytime they have come down like just a little bit. And if they reach the fives, I agree with many of the analysts when I say this, it's going to be a real problem for the housing market once again. We will see as many home buying bidding wars like we did back at the beginning of the height of the pandemic because of the lack of supply of homes that we have on the market. Those lower priced homes are going to be the ones that most people are going to be vying for. And it just seems to me the people that have the most availability to purchase those homes are either going to be private equity, and if the interest rates go down, they're going to want to go ahead and purchase those because they're going to have cheap money to work with, or really, really well-funded individuals that have money that's been given to them by family members, or they have really high-end paying jobs. We've gotten to the point right now, in order to have a home, you actually have to be pretty darn wealthy. Do you know that the average American home right now for an individual will have to be somebody that earns at least $115,000? That is a staggering amount of money to buy the average house in the United States. Like I said earlier, I'm taking the whole entire United States in perspective when I'm talking about this, but $115,000, how many people when they first started out were able to buy a house, and what kind of job did you have? I can guarantee you that with the money that my husband and I made for our very first house with our very first jobs, there's no way we could afford the houses that are available today in that price range. There's just no way. Our income would never have matched it. And it doesn't match for a good portion of the United States either. More and more people are going to be priced out of the market. And now housing has become a luxury. In order to have a house for yourself of your own, it's going to actually become a luxury. Insanity. I mean, maybe I'm crazy or something, but I don't feel like owning a home should be a luxury. I'm not saying everybody should own a home. I think that everybody should have the ability to be able to at least find an affordable place to live where they're at. Not only all that, rents right now are still extremely high, and they've been promising for the past year that rents would start coming down because of the building that they had been doing over the last couple of years with multifamily housing, apartment buildings, and conversions into apartments. But do you know what they all ended up being? They ended up being luxury apartment buildings. They ended up being really big homes that were being built. And it wasn't in the price range for a lot of people. So rents continue to go up in most locations across the United States. Being in your own place to live is now a luxury. It's crazy, absolute insane. It's actually making me very nervous. But this house of cards can't last forever. I truly believe that at some point something's going to give. I don't know what it's going to be. I still say it's going to be the job market that really puts it all in perspective. But I will tell you this, if we start seeing things, and I always say keep your eye on the car market, you know what I'm talking about, used cars. If people can't pay their leases, if people can't pay their car notes, then you have a big repo of car loans. And one of the first repos that always happen are ones that are in the leases and used cars. So I want you to start looking at the car auctions and see if you see more cars hitting those markets. And I want you to see how old those cars are. Are they the cars that were purchased in 2020 or in 2021? Those are the same people that purchased a car, so they can't afford to pay for it now. And maybe they'll be losing their house too in the near future. If you're counting on this and you are gauging that market and you're trying to time the market at this time, I want you to also put this in perspective as well. If you are looking at that and you're thinking, well, a lot more people are going to lose their home, maybe they won't sell, maybe it will go into foreclosure. I need you to understand that the foreclosure market takes a long time before you ever see a house actually go back up for sale after it's been through foreclosure. In some areas, like in California, it can take years and years and years. In our area, it can take like 2 to 3 years, but as little as 9 months. It depends on what the financial situation of the people that were actually lost their home. If they're getting divorced or they go through bankruptcy, it even takes longer for the house to be foreclosed on. So don't count on a big wave of foreclosures in the next year or so, even if the job market collapses or you see a bunch of repossessions of cars that hit the market. You know, it's still going to take a lot of time before we see a good portion of homes starting to hit the market that would be in the price range that you would be able to afford. There's some interesting things on the horizon when it comes to the housing market in 2024. And as we look onto the horizon, there's going to be some lawsuits I think you also need to be paying attention to, and that comes towards us, the real estate agents. There is a few lawsuits out there that are claiming that real estate agents that are representing buyers on the buyer side, it's not really fair to sellers to have to pay commissions on that side. Who knows what's going to happen to that? But it could be in the distant future that no longer home buyers will be represented by real estate agents unless the home buyers themselves want to pay the real estate agent to represent them, and it would come out of their own pocket. Seeing that most buyers need representation from a real estate agent in order to fill out those contracts themselves to have fair representation, it could cost them a lot more in closing costs, which they can't really necessarily afford, especially with home prices the way they are right now. So we don't really know what's going to happen with that. In the meantime, if that does go through, it will be like a buyer beware situation, because only the seller would be represented by a real estate agent if the buyer doesn't have a representation by a buyer's agent themselves. It can be pretty confusing. I don't know how to explain it all. I'm not really an attorney, but it is something for you to keep an eye on, especially if you're trying to be a home buyer in the near future when the home prices could shift in either way. And just know, whether you're a buyer or a seller, at any point, conditions are always negotiable. Nothing's set in stone, and there's nothing that's standard. You could always negotiate your commissions. Another thing that you should probably be aware of, just go look in your local newspaper to see if they got any federal aid when it comes to affordable housing in your area. A lot of areas have decided to turn in some commercial areas and turn them into more affordable areas with multifamily housing, and they've taken federal grants to do that. So if you're looking for a house or a more affordable apartment, that might be something that you want to look out for to see if it's something in the future. One more thing, if you're thinking about renting an apartment in the near future, I want you to pay attention to some of the local laws that have just recently passed in some areas that are requiring people to no longer be allowed to have anybody else living in their house unless they've been on the lease, and they cannot like sublet their house. And even if you have a mortgage, you can't have anybody sublease your house. They just don't want to have any more people in their house than they're supposed to be in their house. I don't know if it has to do with the schooling in the area or the taxes in the area. Some areas are really cracking down on this to not allow people to rent rooms out of their home. I think it's a really crappy thing, especially in the economy that we're in, but I just want you to be aware of that, especially if you're new to a certain area and that someone's giving you an offer like on Craigslist, and then you're going to be kicked out 3 months later because the city says you can't live there because you're subletting a room out of a house. Just be aware. I'm so tired of unprecedented events in every aspect of our lives, and I'm sure you are too. So let's just hope that 2024 is a little bit calmer than it was in 2023. But my crystal ball, here she is, says very unlikely. What is your crystal ball saying about the housing market for 2024? Let me know in the comments section below. To watch more videos about the affordability crisis here in the United States, you're going to want to watch these videos right here. My name is Kristina Smallhorn, your real estate whisperer, and I tell you all this because good real estate information matters.